Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, a weekly show discussing the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Welcome, Thanasi.
Thanks for having me, and you're in such good spirits. It's great to have you on board.
Yes. Well, let's get right into it. In this week's episode, we're going to be reviewing WWE's Smackdown and Raw episodes, which saw the return of Bianca Belair to save Charlotte Flair from damage control, and the setup for Cody Rhodes versus Damien Priest at Crown Jewel. Later on, we'll also look into what happened over on AEW, including a dream match between Andrade El Idolo and Bryan Danielson, and the debut appearance of the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Woo! If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. All right, well, let's get straight into it. We're going to start off with WWE, and as always, we do SmackDown. So over to our SmackDown specialist, Thanasi.
Well, allow me to take it away. So, SmackDown opened with a Paul Heyman promo, which was gloating about Jimmy having screwed Jay and Cody Rhodes out of the tag team titles match. And of course, Heyman also confirms, as we all expected, the undisputed title match at Crown Jewel between Roman and LA Knight. And Paul Heyman, he really leans organically into the crowd, just yaying to the mention of LA Knight's name. And he was very good reacting to the crowd and picking up on that. LA Knight, of course, also comes down and he calls out Roman, but Roman's not there. So he settles for a contract signing next week instead. So that's our opening segment for the evening. Opening contest of the evening is Montez Ford versus Santos Escobar. The highlight from that match is just that awesome Frankensteiner that Santos hits off the top rope. I always really love that. And of course, following an outside brawl between members of the factions, Montez Ford pulls an inside cradle, a very devastating move, in order to get the win. John Cena comes out and cuts a promo. Now, if I can just detail what happens here, the fans start chanting, "Thank you, Cena," but he's not retiring. Like usually we thank someone when they're going out for an injury break or they're retiring. I don't know what's going on here, but he says that it's been 2002 days since he won a televised singles match. That is an awfully long time. And he's getting the treatment here. I don't know if this is going to be controversial, but he's getting the treatment that Sting should have received, basically, these kinds of reactions. That's what should have happened. And he announces kind of like an open challenge. And who should answer? It's Solo. So Solo and Cena have a brawl. They don't actually have a match. Jimmy joins, and surprise, surprise, Jey Uso invades SmackDown. He actually ends up eating a $10,000 fine from Nick Aldis for having invaded, and he gets kicked out of the building, not by himself. Adam Pearce gets kicked out as well. So I'm thinking here, and Dimitri, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. This really seems like we're sowing the seeds here for a Survivor Series SmackDown versus Raw feud. And it seems like they're really going to lean into it. It'd be even better if they had like an NWA title match between Adam Pearce and Nick Aldis. I think that would be a nice middle of the card match at Survivor Series. But brand warfare is coming back. How are you feeling about this? Excited? Skeptical? What do you reckon?
Well, I brought this up a week or two ago. I can't remember when, but all I can start thinking about is we're going to get a certain stipulation coming back, and it's going to be brand warfare in the form of war games. Yes, no, I'm very excited by this. I'm one of those few people that's always enjoyed it when SmackDown and Raw has been actually like a competitive rivalry and not just a we exist and then it's like, hey, I'm on this show and now I'm on this show. And I've always enjoyed the competition and the idea of it being brought back through Nick Aldis. I'll take it any way possible, and this seems like an organic way to get started again.
Here's my query about it though. If it's going to be brand warfare through war games, right? The two big heel groups in WWE would go very well together and they're on separate brands. And I'm talking about the Judgment Day and the Bloodline. I feel like they would be a very good pairing to have as the heel side. So do you envision that that's going to be playing into it at all? Or do you really think it's going to be like a real mix-up where maybe like Jey Uso and Cody potentially have to coexist with the Judgment Day as part of Team Raw, and then the Bloodline have to coexist with people like John Cena and LA Knight on SmackDown. Do you see that that's what's going to end up happening?
I see a version of the latter. It could still turn out to be where it's like there are these mixes and matches of people, but there's no established group that's part of it at all. But I do see it being the latter rather than we take the dominant faction of Raw, go up against the dominant faction of SmackDown and compete that way. I think if they were going to do that, I would rather them pursue that option in just like a tag team match in general. That's how,
Like a Survivor Series original kind of match, an
exactly.
elimination match.
Either that or like, the undisputed WWE tag team titles are on the line and the victor is considered, the winner, goes to which the respective brand, something like that.
Well, maybe I'll continue on with the fantasy booking perhaps later when we look at Raw as well, but I'll continue on with the show because next up after this was a Logan Paul promo with Rey Mysterio to set up their US title match at Crown Jewel. And it's exactly what you and I predicted last week. And I think their match has potential, and I think it's going to be quite good potential. I'm looking forward to it. I'm just going to be disappointed to see Logan Paul be the one to dethrone a legend like Rey Mysterio. A undercard match followed up, Austin Theory versus Cameron Grimes and Dragon Lee. Austin Theory teaming up, of course, with his partner, Grayson Waller. So Dragon Lee actually had some good showings on Raw, on SmackDown as a preview of what his NXT skills are. And he's pretty highly rated. And I actually hope that he lives up to it because I'm keen for more of him. And I'm not going to go so far as to say Dragon Lee is the future Rey Mysterio. Certainly not yet. But WWE has been searching for that next Rey Mysterio for basically since Rey Mysterio was brought on board in 2002. They've been looking for that next luchador. But I guess just going to the finish of the match, it's roll through flatliner and A-Town down by the heels to get the victory. And we'll be seeing more of Dragon Lee, I'm sure, in future. Now, I don't usually do the backstage segments in my recap. However, this was a good one because Kevin Owens sat down for an interview with Kathy Kelly. He was wearing a Yokozuna shirt, told us not to read too much into it because Yokozuna, of course, is a member of the Anoa'i family, which the Bloodline are the current stars of. And he says, just a coincidence, given his experience with them. But he says that he's excited for his SmackDown opportunities to face people like Rey Mysterio, like Sheamus, and more. I'm pretty excited to see this kind of side of Kevin Owens because he's kind of going through by announcing these kinds of opponents. Means he's really keen for just some fresh matches, and I'm going to be so keen to see how he goes in his singles run. Frankly, I want to see another Kevin Owens World Heavyweight Championship run, so that makes me disappointed to see that he's on SmackDown, but he's being billed as a main eventer, so that's what I'm keen for. Let me jump now to the main event. This is, frankly, it is one of the highlights of the night, and it's Charlotte versus Io Sky for the Women's Championship. And again, they're really pushing Charlotte as a babyface. They're not letting go. So we see a real kind of like heel babyface dynamic where Charlotte just needs to be the face for some reason. Io hits a sit-out sunset flip powerbomb. That's one of the nicer moves of the match. Charlotte applies a firewoman's carry, climbs to the top turnbuckle, and hits an avalanche fall-away slam. That was a fantastic visual. Overall, it was a great TV match, almost pay-per-view quality, I would say. And there is a bootleg Bret Hart / Goldberg spot for the finish of this match with the ref's back turned when Io clutches the gold that's fed to her by Dakota Kai. Dakota goes to distract the ref, and Charlotte hits the spear, but smacks her head into the gold that Io is holding, and it leads to the weakened queen being pinned. And big news, as when Damage Control comes in to beat on Charlotte, who makes the save? It is Bianca Belair. She is back on SmackDown to save the Queen from a beatdown, and she utterly cleans house. So she's still a babyface. I would have like to have seen her come back as a heel. I think she has good heel potential. There's still time for that to happen. But yeah, Bianca Belair's back. And that's what closes the show for us. Dimitri, back to you.
Okay, well, on that note, let's now move on to this week's Raw. So let's quickly run down a bit on what happened on the red side of things this week. The show started with Finn Balor and Damien Priest gloating about their tag team victory last week before they were rudely interrupted by Cody Rhodes. And this set up a match between Cody and Damien Priest for Crown Jewel. And it was followed quickly by a vicious chair assault on Rhodes' left leg. We then got into the first match of the night, which was Alpha Academy versus the New Day, which the New Day took thanks to a springboard elbow drop by Xavier Woods on Otis. We then saw a brief backstage segment between Rhea Ripley and Seth Rollins that is seemingly testing some sort of potential link on that end. It's quite intriguing, wouldn't you say, Thanasis?
Can I just say, I thought it was hilarious when, because during that segment, or perhaps later on during the night, Rhea Ripley backstage goes to sign the contract for her title match. And she says to Adam Pearce, I'm keeping the pen, right? Just so in line with the character, such a small detail. Just really wanted to draw attention to it.
Okay, well, that was a bit later in the night, but I appreciate that you were very much high on Rhea Ripley this week.
Indeed.
The next match we had was Becky Lynch versus Indy Hartwell for the NXT Women's Championship, which Becky managed to retain with her disarm her submission. And this is quite notable. I'm just going to put this as an aside. Becky Lynch was actually dethroned the next day on NXT by Lyra Valkyrie. So a big upset on that end. But it goes to show you, the man can only defend the title so many times before someone comes out on top. We then had the Women's World Championship contract signing between the 5 competitors. All of them were in the ring except for Rhea Ripley, who was supposedly the link to all the chaos. And surprise, surprise, there was a beatdown and a brawl that came through the contract signing, with the exception of Rhea Ripley, who was safely on the outside. Johnny Gargano managed to get the win over Giovanni Vinci, thanks to a little bit of an assist from Tommaso Ciampa, who came out and attacked Ludwig Kaiser. We then had a Nakamura video where he basically said he awaits his next target to unleash another vicious side of him. And then we finally got to what I consider one of the highlights, which was the Logan Paul promo. The reason I call this a highlight is purely because Dominic Mysterio came out to sort of support Logan against his father. And it just made me think, my God, has there ever been so much heat in one ring? Honestly, I don't know about you, but like with those two in there, I just thought, my God, that was a stroke of genius, because they're probably the 2 most organically hated men in WWE right now. Is that fair to say?
Certainly they are. And I mean, one of them is in the best way possible, because it's like that organic heel heat. I guess the other one's a little bit more pulling on the fact that he's not an actual wrestler. But having them both together in the ring, it was a bit of a combustible situation.
Certainly was. Logan managed to get very dastardly, in my opinion, when he asked Samantha Irvin to come into the ring and sort of pre-announce him already for practice as the United States champion. Ricochet intervened and actually took them both out. So that set up a little confrontation that's going to continue between Ricochet and those 2 competitors. Following that, Piper Niven and Chelsea Green got the win against Natalya and technically Nikki Cross, although she, in a trance, walked away from ringside. So there was something weird at play going on with Nikki Cross. We then had the semi-main of the night, which was Sami Zayn versus Drew McIntyre. This was a very solid match. Just a couple of things I wanted to point out. Wade Barrett, at one point on commentary, said after Sami Zayn landed his blue thunder bomb, he goes, the vast majority of opponents are done for at that point. And I thought to myself, has Zayn won a match with the blue thunder bomb? Like, I think it's only like once or twice.
He won one match, and it made news headlines when he did it on SmackDown last year or the year before.
Yeah, so I just thought it was a weird way to sort of build up Drew McIntyre's street cred, considering that everyone kicks out of the Blue Thunder Bomb. It's not to say it's not a good move in his repertoire, but certainly not the match killer that he sort of made it out to be. Rhea Ripley having a very busy night, obviously, because she came out mid-match here as well. Initially, and I think some people might not credit this, initially she actually distracted Drew from landing his Claymore kick, and it gave Sammy a chance to sort of get back in the match, but then she went up all the way to the ropes to distract Sammy as well, and this allowed Drew to then hit his Claymore for the win. We then had a very, do you want to say something about that match, Thanos?
I just wanted to make this comment that I was expecting Sammy to lose this one, even though they're trying to book him as a main eventer. But I actually thought that maybe it would be something like a Drew getting disqualified for like a heel level of aggression. I thought that that's actually one way that they could have gone about it. But I guess the way that they protected Sammy was by giving him a loss as a result of distraction. But that's more what I was really thinking about. Yeah.
Well, I think they're not gonna do anything overtly heelish until at the very least Crown Jewel, because they're trying to do like a slow burn of like, is Drew McIntyre a good guy or a bad guy? And we're gonna find out, I think, at the pay-per-view.
I think you're right. I think that's a very good assessment. And on this point about slow burn, I've got some comments to make about the main event, but I'll let you get on to the main event.
All right, well, before the main event, there was just very quickly a squash match between Bronson Reed and Akira Tozawa, which had been set up earlier in the night. Bronson Reed winning with his Tsunami Splash, so he's building up his momentum again following his Intercontinental Championship loss. And then we had the main event of the night, which was Jey Uso versus Damien Priest. So another solid match. I wasn't given as much time as maybe others would have thought. It was put on about 15, 16 minutes from at the end of the show to actually commence. And there was a moment where Jey Uso seemingly was going to win the match after hitting his Uso splash, but he got distracted by Balor. Influenced by Balor, who was distracting the referee. He actually dove onto Balor on the outside, and this gave Priest enough time to recover. Balor then dragged Jey down mid trying to enter the ring, and so it sort of created this like a weird low blow situation against the ropes for Jey, and this gave Priest an opportunity to hit his South of Heaven chokeslam, which eventually got him the victory. Post-match, Balor beat down on Jey some more. They tried to injure his leg as they had done to Cody, but the American Nightmare obviously can't be stopped by being on one leg because he hobbled down for the save, attempted to injure Priest's right leg before Balor pulled his teammate to safety, and that's how the show closed out. There are plenty of thoughts I have on this, but Vanessa, I want to throw to you since it seems like you also had something you wanted to say about this.
Yeah, you might agree, you might disagree with me, but just look, my reflection on this, and also during the opening segment, but also during this main event, is we just keep getting more of the same. It's Judgment Day and Jey and Cody, and I'm honestly tired of this. Like, we need Cody to have something else to occupy his time, basically up until the new year, right? And I think we actually need a way to freshen this up is to move into individual feuds for all the Judgment Day members. So, like, one of my ideas for pairing up is put Dominic against Jey, and perhaps like they're kind of fighting a little bit for Rhea's favor because we see that Jey's got some good chemistry going on with Rhea Ripley. We can put Finn Balor with Sami Zayn. We can put Seth Rollins in a program with Priest because Priest has the money in the bank. So maybe they can enter some kind of a program there. And it frees up Cody to go into a feud with a heel Drew McIntyre. And it even means that like the tag titles can actually go to this new tag division, right? Because we've been having segments with Alpha Academy, with a newly reunited DIY, the New Day, Viking Raiders, okay, a little bit out of it, but like there's a lot of options here to freshen things up. And like I'm getting really, really tired of this. And like even one alternative, which I've been hearing through the dirt sheets, is that Randall Keith Orton could be returning at Survivor Series. Potentially, we could be putting him in a program with Cody that takes him to the end of the year and have Drew work with someone else. But it feels old, right? And it was slow burn for a while, that we said before, but it's kind of like bad fish paradigm, right? Like this fish tastes bad, I'm going to slow down and spit it out. That's where we're at now. What do you reckon? Do you feel the same way or do you have different thoughts?
I feel similar, but not because I think the talent themselves are making this boring. I think the reason I feel that way is because I like tag titles being competed by tag teams. I like mid card titles being defended by stars that have been established as mid card and actually got some momentum going. I like the world championship actually main eventing the show that it is on. Like these are all things that I would prefer to see happen because right now, I think one of the reasons they're reluctant to take the title of Seth Rollins is because they've not even presented what's going on with Seth Rollins as that important. I think the tag titles, it's been makeshift teams ever since Sami and Kevin Owens, which yes, they have chemistry, but they're not by nature a tag team. You give it to Damien Priest and Finn Balor, and that's more acceptable because they're in a group. And then when this little stopgap thing they did with Cody and Jay, it's like to me, it's like give DIY a chance, like you said, give Alpha Academy a chance, I guess. Give it for God's sake, Imperium. Those two
Imperium.
those two was such a dominant tag team in NXT, and here they're battling every week about for the favor of Gunther. It's like, how about they compete together and actually be a dominant force? This is where I think Raw does need a bit of a change, and I think it will start hopefully and I do think this will happen when they introduce the new tag titles
I hope so.
for each brand, because I think you can sort of sense that it's coming to the moment where it's going to happen for SmackDown. And once that happens, I think it's really going to make it a lot easier to just be on Raw and say, all right, look, now we have our brand specific tag title division. So let's work that out.
Couldn't agree more.
All right. Well, that's a lot on WWE. Let's now move on to their competition, AEW. And let's start off with what happened on the latest episode of Collision. So, Thanasi, do you want to take us through what happened?
Well, it opened with a bang because it was a dream match. It was Bryan Danielson versus Andrade El Idolo. It was a human game of chess, really, like a very technical masterpiece, but there wasn't much build for why these guys were wrestling each other. And especially when you've got like a dream match, you kind of want to promote it ahead of time, or you want to have some kind of a build happening. Do you have any views on that, or do you think that I'm right on this?
Look, the match itself was fantastic, but I do want to say that that's one of the issues I have with AEW because they focus a lot, and it's like a sport where it's like, oh, look at these two teams going up against each other. How great will it be? In this case, look at these two wrestlers that we both know how great they are. Let's just put them together. Whereas, like, what makes wrestling at its best is when you feel the stakes behind the battle. It's like The Rock and Austin going up against each other on its own would have been just a fabulous meeting of the minds of two great, captivating stars. But the stories they were building towards why they wanted to compete against each other is really what sold it. I always go back to like the WrestleMania 17 hype package where Austin, like the first half of it is about them trying to piss off Austin with his wife at the time, Deborah. And then he switches focus completely and says, look, I don't care about that. This is about that title. I need that title back. And it's like, you felt like these two are actually competing to represent the company. And that was what was at stake. So I think it's something with AEW that I would like to see them move on because we know they have the match quality. They just need to put that extra dimension behind it.
That's fair enough there. But the finish of this match did have a little bit more story building. Let me tell you exactly what happened. So Danielson was mostly targeting the left shoulder and arm of the luchador, whom Schiavone actually at one point called Andre, not Andrade. So I think that was a bit of a mix-up there. But there's another big wrestler called Andre that is much more successful, I suppose, in reputation than Andrade. He actually managed to hit that double moonsault spot that I love so much, where he hits a moonsault, realizes that his opponent dodges, lands on his feet, and then hits a standing moonsault. But Danielson actually gets the knees up on the second one. So it leads him into the label lock right in the center of the ring following his stomps kicks. And that actually doesn't finish the match. It's just a crucifix pin after a scuffle that Bryan uses to end up winning. And the boys observe the code of honor, after which the lights go out. Malachi Black hits Black Mass on Danielson. This looks to be a new feud coming up. But this is not the last we're going to see of Malachi Black during the night. Continue with a bit of a recap of the show before we get to that more. A sullen Sky Blue takes on Hollywood Haley from OVW. She's making her Collision debut. She was in the Netflix series about OVW that was starring Al Snow that's been on recently. So she's known as Hollywood Haley J in there. And SB gets the easy win in this one. You'll notice she shares initials with and was wearing ring gear reminiscent of Scooby-Doo. She had Mystery Machine themed gear. The Guns versus the Outrunners. Well, this is a squash match, so that was easy. And the lights go out during this one as well. And the Devil, that MJF mask appears briefly on the Tron, but nothing else. So this was the second match of the night to have a lights going out moment. We also get a Memphis street fight. Jeff Jarrett versus Eddie Kingston. And the Ring of Honor champion was in street clothes for this. I really love that. When you're going to have some kind of a street fight, I love the detail of wearing street clothes, jeans, something like that. It's exactly what I want to see. There's a spot with Jay Lethal hitting a cutter on Kingston off of the stage and through a table on the scaffolding at the bottom. And then we also get another big spot, another table spot. Double J hits a suplex at ringside onto Kingston, but it wasn't enough to break it. So in order to break this second table spot, he had to drop a standing elbow, get on top of the table, and crack Kingston through it. Kingston gets pinned after a stroke by Double J and a lethal injection by Jay Lethal, and that is what brings about the finish of the match. Miro is in action against Action Andrade, who is accompanied by Miro's wife, CJ Perry. Now, this was a solid match, and it ended up with a game over camel clutch for Andrade as he is knocked out to the camel clutch. CJ Perry, of course, was very difficult to read her face because she was smiling at times when even Miro was doing well in this match. And again, like with SmackDown, where I don't usually cover the backstage segments, but Eddie Kingston cut an amazing promo. And I don't know if you ended up seeing this, Dimitri, but he says that he used to respect Jay Lethal, but not anymore because he's become Jeff Jarrett's bitch. And especially the fact that he's calling him his uncle. He queries to the camera how Jay's parents feel about this, because he says he knows the family of Jay Lethal, and he says to him, "Don't bring your parents to their Ring of Honor title match that is coming up, because it is going to break Eddie's heart to watch Lethal's mother crying for her son." Eddie Kingston knows the parents and therefore says that his mother's not going to be crying because her son is getting beaten up. It's because her son deserves that beating. And he uses Lethal's real name, Jamar. And he was unbelievably passionate in this promo. Like, did you end up seeing it, Dimitri, or have you not watched it yet? Because you have to watch it. I'm not doing it enough justice.
I didn't catch that, but it only reinforces an opinion that I have, which is that Eddie Kingston is one of the best promos in wrestling today.
You would not believe it. Like, just the emotion that he was getting out there. Like, I was actually I was only half watching it when I had the broadcast on, and then I had to turn back and kind of like rewind it a little bit because I was so enthralled by it. In the semi-main of the evening, FTR defeat some jobbers in their in-ring return. It was a not very short absence. And for the third time this evening, the lights go out and House of Black interfere in this match to end it with a no contest. So House of Black have announced their intentions to be a little bit aggressive towards Bryan Danielson, but also his mates FTR. Finally, in the main event of the evening, they gave like a fair chunk of this segment for this match, and it was Ricky Starks and Big Bill defending their tag titles against Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta. The House of Black interfere in this match as well, and it is the third time of the evening. leading to Ricky Starks actually hitting the Rochambeau to retain the gold. In the closing of the show, House of Black and Ricky Starks and Bill beat down on the Blackpool Combat Club and FTR, leading to the return of one Jon Moxley. He's back in physical action again, and the babyfaces have a real nice feel-good moment to close out the show as they beat on some of their heel opponents. But that's the big news for the closing of the evening. Jon Moxley is back and is physical. Dimitri, any thoughts on the show of Collision as a whole?
I thought it was a good episode. I think it had a lot going for it, and it. I still think that Collision is on its way into becoming just another version of Dynamite instead of standing out like I'd hoped. But the thing is, when I watch Dynamite, there's every so often I watch it and go, that was a great episode. So the same thing can definitely be said with Collision, at least moving forward. There will be those odd weeks where it's like, you know what, maybe it's too reminiscent, but it was still good.
Yeah, I agree with you. Look, overall, I did think this was a good show. Had a lot of good matches on offer, and somewhat promising with storylines as well. Just before I let you go on to the Dynamite review, I just want to recap the Battle of the Belts results because they took place immediately after Collision. So I'm just going to run through the results very briefly. Orange Cassidy defeated John Silver for the AEW International title. Samoa Joe squashed Tony Nese to retain the ROH World Television Championship. Chris Statlander defeated Willow Nightingale for the TBS title. And in the main event, Billy Gunn and the Acclaimed defeated Daniel Garcia, Matt Menard, and Cool Hand Angelo Parker for the World Trios Championship. So those were our results.
All right, well, Thanasi, we've discussed Collision. It's about time we get into Dynamite. And to start off, we had a backstage interview with Renee Paquette featuring MJF and the Kingdom, chiefly Roddy Strong. And right after, we had the Devil Mask icon appear that you talked about on Collision. So it seems like this thing's ongoing, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like a continuation. I think that potentially a video idea for us in future, and let us know in the comments what you reckon. Should we do a speculation of possible suspects of who is behind the Devil Mask or who are the people behind the mask?
I think that's a great idea, actually. We should probably get onto that. So to start off with, obviously, the episode started very heavily on MJF. So he had the match with Juice Robinson for the Dynamite Diamond Ring, which he managed to win. And then this was followed by a sort of brawl between Bullet Club Gold and the Kingdom at one point, and then eventually the Acclaimed came out to make the official save for MJF. MJF sort of accepted the challenge issued by Jay White a couple episodes prior about the 4v4 battle to sort of reclaim the Triple B back. And right after all that, he goes up to the rampway, and who should come out but Kenny Omega. So this is obviously teasing, building on what happened last week. And that's it. We're going to get a match between the two on Collision.
Not only are we going to get a match between the two, we have a reason to fight. And I think that's been one of your pet peeves, as we mentioned before. They have a very good reason to fight because Kenny wants to preserve his record holding reign on most days as champion. And MJF, of course, wants to break that.
Yes, and actually, like I'm glad you brought that up because for me, that's what makes this really enticing because these two have not faced each other in the entire run of AEW. If they're going to face on a random episode of TV, you got to make sure it makes sense. And this one is like such an organic reason for them to compete.
And it's also not just setting it up on the night because that's the WWE style where it's like we'll have a backstage confrontation and then wrestle later. This one's actually got 3-4 days build. So that's actually really healthy.
Moving on from the MJF stuff, we went into a tag match between John Silver and Alex Reynolds of the Dark Order versus Hook and RVD, the two babyfaces, the popular babyfaces, taking out this victory. And then we had a Tony Storm, I guess film is what she likes to call them, but this played during the picture-in-picture ad break, so I didn't put it as much focus. Then we had the segment with Sting. It was announced that Tony Khan had a special gift for the icon, and it was a hell of a gift because this saw the first appearance in All Elite Wrestling of Ric Flair. And I said, firstly, whoa! But secondly, how like did you really enjoy this, or was this kind of like it's just it is what it is?
No, this was super organic and really lovely because like as soon as you heard the music hit, right? The signature theme of Ric Flair wherever he has gone. And it was just like a no way moment, really. And you saw it like Sting really couldn't even believe it. Like it didn't actually clock for him immediately. And then as soon as he saw him on the ramp on the stage, that's when you actually saw the emotion come out from Sting. And I mean, we've speculated about it for ages. We've joked about it a lot about Ric Flair jumping ship. He has to make some money, so he's just going to end up at AEW. But it's just a massive OMG moment. And I just want to make this fact. He has now the trifecta of having appeared in all three of North America's national promotions that are based in the South, namely WCW, TNA, and now AEW. So that's a fun fact. He's got the trifecta.
Well, he joins the list now, doesn't he, of those wrestlers sort of in this with the promotions of the South,
Along with Sting, of course.
along with Sting. Look, obviously Ric Flair didn't have much to say. It was just more of like let's enjoy it. But the intrigue came when Christian Cage walked out with his brethren, and he had a vicious promo line, which I just loved. And it was, if there was a God, Ric Flair would have been dead 20 years ago, which I just thought, oh, what a, what a, what an asshole. Like, I'm sorry, but like, I just thought it was a brilliant line. Obviously, Christian Cage must have an endless amount of respect for Ric Flair somewhere deep in that, where in that crevice where his heart used to be. But this is leading into a 3-on-3 proposition at Full Gear, involving Christian Cage and his partners, his children, if you will, against Sting, Darby, and an opponent of their choice. So we'll see where that plays out. We had a match between the Hardys and Brother Zay and the Young Bucks and Hangman Adam Page for the ROH Trios titles, which the champions managed to retain. Afterwards, there was a video shown of Swerve in Adam Page's home, which was quite vicious as well. Hikaru Shida successfully defended her women's title against Ruby Soho. Samoa Joe made an appearance, offering his services to MJF in the 4-on-4 battle in exchange for a title match. And then in our main event, we saw Bryan Danielson and Claudio Castagnoli defeat Kazuchika Okada and Orange Cassidy. Thanasi, was there anything from this that stuck out to you? Because I'll be honest, after the Ric Flair stuff, it kind of just felt like the episode was going through the motions.
Yeah, I mean, like my thoughts were, I was kind of surprised. Like, I don't know if Samoa Joe offering his services to team up with MJF really made much sense. Like, I think it makes more sense to have that. Is he going to pick the Acclaimed or is he going to pick the Kingdom? I think that one actually has a bit more meat to it. But yeah, there wasn't really all that much. And I mean, I don't know if you're going to say anything about the main event, but it was a good TV match, but really building towards not really all that much. It was kind of like almost excellent house show tier as far as booking it, right? Like putting these people together, and a really good match. But I mean, there wasn't really anything there. Like you could even have had this match outside of canon, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed there was a moment where for 90 seconds, Kazuchika Okada was in the ring, not as the legal man. So I kind of just thought that was like, I got that feeling you got because of that. It's like, oh, it just feels like it's a nice TV match, a nice little moment.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Thanasi, that wraps up AEW. But just as a quick extra point I want to make, have you heard about these rumors? So like obviously this week, some big news that was made was in regards to TNA. That is the reformation and the renaming to TNA. And a part of this big news was the reports that backstage was a certain CM Punk. Now, this is, of course, in reference both to their Bound for Glory pay-per-view, which it seems to be like this is the start of their next phase, sort of going back to formula, if you will. But I want to ask, what are your thoughts on both of those news items?
Look, the TNA part, the way that I think about it is some people never stopped calling it TNA. Certainly me, like I got thrown very many times over the last few years, still ended up calling it just TNA instead of Impact, which was its new name. And I think this is real good, right? It's going to reclaim, I believe, some lost fans, I guess, just to kind of bring some more attention back to it. It doesn't mean that it's going to sustain them, right? And that's okay. That's all right. But it is going to build a bit more hype back up for the brand of TNA. And I think I recall having read somewhere that they're going to be doing live television now. So it seems like they're really going all in with this new rebrand. It's kind of going to be like a fresh start. As for CM Punk being spotted backstage, this is not the only time, so I don't want to over sensationalize here, but they did say that they were keen to have him on board. Of course, which wrestling promotion would not want CM Punk on board? But it just feels like, I don't know, it's just, I'm finding it really hard to believe. It's either going to be WWE or nowhere. Otherwise, it's going to feel as if he's just been kind of discarded by both the big national promotions. Do you have any thoughts on either of those news items? But I'm curious to hear your thoughts about the Punk one in particular, to be honest.
Well, look, with TNA, I just want to wait to see what it becomes. I wasn't the biggest TNA fan, though I did, like growing up, it was sort of there in the background always. So I'm just curious to see where they take it. In regards to Punk, I truly feel that that just would be a waste of an environment for him, especially right now. I think you'd want to see what TNA becomes before you put someone like Punk on it. He could see himself as the guy that is the marquee, similar to what Chris Jericho was for AEW, but I truly think that given how much he could make even in a short period of time, just in his return to WWE, that would probably be a more attractive proposition. But that being said, the current reports from that are saying that WWE aren't looking to bring him back right now. And if he still wants to be in wrestling, then this might be his only avenue.
I think you're exactly right. And it would kind of be like, just what's the best I can get sort of thing, as opposed to how can we get the best as a wrestling promotion, right? It would be kind of a little bit of rent seeking, I think, is how I would see it. But that's my view on it, to be honest.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's episode of the Audible Finish. Next week, we're going to be tuning in and giving our predictions for Crown Jewel. So there'll be a lot of intrigue as to WWE's end, and then obviously the building cycle as we're getting towards Full Gear. Perhaps Ric Flair will make another appearance.
Potentially.
Give us another chance to woo. Until then, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.